Colonial America and the Grievances of the Colonists. So, let's catch us up to speed. We're going to use our friend Dash here from The Incredibles to help us out a little bit. So before we move any further into our unit, I feel that it's important that we have a little bit of background information first. So we're going to go all the way back when. So the British sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to reach North America in the early 1600s. They were developing their colony in Jamestown. So Great Britain settled in North America in 1607 and created their first colony in Jamestown, Virginia. And as the years went on, more and more people from Britain began to come over to North America to settle into the colonies. And we would eventually expand from Jamestown, Virginia to the 13 colonies. Now, how did they do this? Because that's about 150 years, and we developed from one to the other. So between 1607 and 1764, the colonies were thriving. They founded their own churches. As we know, the colonists came over and left Britain because they wanted to be able to practice their own religion outside of the Church of England, which was basically mandated in England. If you didn't follow their religion, you could be jailed for it. So they came over here and founded their own churches. They also established an awesome economy and a lot of businesses to get their colony going. We had the fur trade, the lumber trade, there were craftsmen, there was farmers and plantation owners, and they made a lot of money selling and buying and growing different things like tobacco and cotton, which were cash crops. So the economy was booming over there. And lastly, they built very large cities and very busy ports. And ports are just another word for a place for boats that are coming from other countries to come into North America and bring goods. So the colonies were doing great. They were very self-reliant and they had become very successful. And the colonies were making money by producing their own resources like cotton and lumber and trading them with other European countries. So not only did they take their stuff and give it to each other in the colonies, but they also sent it out and traded with other countries. So the colonists in North America had way more freedom in the colonies than they did in Great Britain. So after 1764, the colonies begin to have major beef with the motherland, aka Britain. So why are they so mad? What happened? So there's a lot of questions already. Why are the colonists mad? What did Britain do? Does this have anything to do with the Revolutionary War? Why does King George III look like he's wearing drapes? I mean, come on, George. Really? Striking resemblance to my grandmother's curtains, that's for sure. Anyway, so Great Britain was seeing all of the success and money that the colonies were having. There you go. You see King George looking pretty miserable over there while the colonists are making mad dough. And as we know, the original purpose of Britain creating the colony in North America was to, one, expand their power in the world, and two, increase their wealth. So Britain felt like they could be benefiting more from all of the economic successes of the colonies, since that's pretty much the point of having a colony, is to create it, take all the resources from it, and make a ton of money. So in 1764, Britain began to impose, aka force, taxes and acts, which are laws, on the colonies without the colonists' permission. So these taxes and acts would force the colonies to give more and more money that they worked hard for to Britain. So as we could see, the guy in the blue shirt, who do we think he is? Britain. And the guy upside down getting all the money shaken out of him, that's a colonist on tax day. So some examples of some of the acts that Britain imposed on the colonists included the Sugar Act, which happened in 1764. So these taxes were on imports of textiles, wines, coffee, and sugar. Very, very important to the daily diet of the colonists, let me tell you. So imagine every time you go to pour a cup of coffee, boom, you're taxed on that sugar. Boom, you're taxed on the wine you're drinking at dinner. Another one is the Currency Act in 1764. So basically what this did was it made the colonists' money, the paper money that they used in the colonies, it made it very weak. and that way the money that belonged to Britain remained very strong. So it totally kind of turned the colonists' economy upside down because it caused a major decline in the value of the paper money that the colonists used. So now their money wasn't as strong. And then lastly, here's another example, the Quartering Act of 1765. This one blows my mind, but it basically required colonists to provide food and lodging, aka a place to stay, to British troops. Now, let me break this down for you because this is pretty wild. So, the Quartering Act really gets me. Imagine this. You have a British soldier, right? Here's one. But not only that, he definitely comes with some friends, right? So he comes over to your house and you're like, dude, what the heck? What do you want? And he's like, hey, I need some food. And by law, you have to give me some food. And also, I need a place to stay because I don't actually live here. I'm just working on behalf of the king. So you're definitely going to have to give me a place to stay. So I'm staying in your house. Boom. And then, you know what? I need a place to use the bathroom too. So, hey, coming in hot, using the bathroom. And you're like, excuse me, this is my house. This is my property, and I should not be forced to have to take care of you and your buddies. Thank you. So, as you could tell, the colonists were super upset. They traveled across an ocean to have some freedom from Britain, but now these taxes and acts are so intrusive. No taxation without representation. This was a major, major slogan for the colonists. Now, what do we think this means? So basically, the colonists wanted to have at least someone in Parliament to represent their interests in the colonies, but Britain wouldn't allow it. So basically, Britain was imposing all of these taxes without any say from any of what the colonists, without working with the colonists and their best interests. So remember in the beginning of the year when we learned about protests? Well, why is it that people protest? Protests happen because people feel that there is some form of injustice or unfairness or mistreatment that is being done by the government or anyone else that holds power in their society, right? So people take action because they feel like that's the only way they can attain change. So people push back to fight for something they believe would make their world better or would make the lives of themselves or other people better. So for the colonists, this very same principle applied too. They were mad with and fed up with all of the unfair laws, taxes, and mistreatment. So they decided to act to show their opposition to British control. So protests eventually escalated to a ton of other events that happened, and I'll name a few here. So first, we have the Boston Massacre on the left, right? So as we can tell in the picture, we have some redcoats, aka the British soldiers, shooting at the colonists. This happened right in Boston in the city. So what happened was that colonists were upset about British troops being so intrusive and enforcing taxes and laws and staying in their homes and eating their food and all that good stuff. And they were fed up about it. So they went to the city and protested the fact that soldiers were there. They protested their presence. And colonists were basically throwing things at these soldiers. They hated them. The soldiers were mistreated them, obviously. And British soldiers were fed up that the colonists were protesting. So one soldier ended up shooting and killing several of the colonists. And this totally shook the colonies. They're like, wow, the British don't care. They're going to shoot down our people. So it was basically to intimidate the colonists to say, hey, back off from your protesting. So in the same year, the Boston Tea Party occurred as well. So basically what happened here was that colonists were very angry about the taxes on imports of tea because they had to pay a ton of money for sugar and coffee and all the things that they loved. And the colonists who were part of a group called the Sons of Liberty decided to climb aboard a British trade ship in the port and decided to throw the tea into the harbor at night because they wanted to show the British that their tea and their taxes didn't matter to them and they didn't need them. And lastly, we have the meeting of the First Continental Congress. So this was huge. This happened in 1774, so basically 2 years before we declared independence. And what this was that delegates or people who represented each colony um, had met in Philadelphia to talk about things that they could do, that each colony could do collectively to try to break ties with Great Britain and ultimately claim their independence. So what could each colony do to kind of stick it to Britain and say, hey, we want nothing to do with you anymore. We want to be independent. So it was the real first kind of coming together of the colonies as one united um, entity and trying to make something better for themselves. So this was something the first time it was really organized. And it's pretty incredible what can be accomplished with a common goal in mind. And remember, this all started with rebellions, protests, and that kind of thing. And it all stemmed from the people of the colonies feeling that they were being mistreated and there was injustices involved.